So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stacie Ross, and I am with the Knowledge Translation Core for NeuroDevNet. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to this webinar, which is presented as part of our ongoing efforts toward knowledge translation and capacity building for NeuroDevNet. This is the first step in the process for NeuroDevNet trainees and researchers to create clear language summaries of your peer-reviewed research papers arising from your NeuroDevNet funded research projects. During this session, we will hear from Michael Johnny, Manager of Knowledge Mobilization, also called Knowledge Translation, for York University. Michael will review principles for clear language writing using the research snapshot format that has been adopted by NeuroDevNet's KT Core. The webinar will be recorded and will be posted on the NeuroDevNet YouTube channel. The slides used in the webinar will be available on the NeuroDevNet SlideShare site. We suggest that you listen to the presentation on your computer speakers. However, if you need to, please feel free to listen by telephone using the toll-free number and code listed on the right-hand side of the screen. If you are not a presenter, put your phone on mute so that other participants don't hear you. Only use the conference line 1-888-299-1889. Access code 195-412-013. Enter the audio pin that shows on the right-hand side panel after you sign into the webinar. If your computer audio isn't working, then please make sure your phone is on mute. The Q&A period at the end will be used to give the speaker a chance to answer the questions you've typed in. You can type them in at any time during the presentations and the Q&A period. The Q&A box is at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Please use this to type in your questions. There will be a link provided to an evaluation survey, which can be filled out while you listen to the Q&A discussion. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Michael Johnny, Manager of the Knowledge Mobilization Unit for York University. He is presenting on knowledge translation and clear language writing. Please go ahead, Michael.
Thank you very much, Stacie. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you very much for your time. Special thanks to Anneliese and Stacie with the KT Core of NeuroDevNet and to NeuroDevNet for this opportunity. I'm delighted to be able to join you. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to be providing a brief introduction around KT and knowledge mobilization. This is something I do standard in all presentations. At the risk of undermining my credibility, it took me about 5 years to be able to explain to my mother what I do. So I know the term is not intuitive for a lot of folks. I'll be focusing my talk around our work here around clear language writing design, specific to the research snapshots. And as Stacie mentioned, there will be time for questions and answers. So a couple problem statements or assumptions that sort of ground the presentation today and really have sort of grounded our work here around clear language writing design. The first one is that research in Canada has an opportunity, I would say a greater opportunity, to help inform issues of public policy, professional practice, and further research. And secondly, is this one's probably a little bit more clear, is the notion of communication. Communication can be a barrier around collaboration and the utilization of research, especially within different sectors. Clear language research summaries are one tool to break down this barrier. So what do I think I know about KT and KMB? Well, I certainly know it is purposeful. It's really aimed to support some very specific outcomes, and those outcomes can be diverse and span diverse interests and stakeholders. It's very social. There's a lot of action and activity within a team and across stakeholder groups. If we look at knowledge mobilization, which is the term we use here at York University, even within KT, I think the knowledge part of that is easier to understand. We're talking about the socialization of data and information, but when we get into the translation or the mobilization piece, perhaps it's a little bit more confusing for folks. I think it really relates back to that first point around the purposefulness, and knowledge mobilization, it does come from sort of a militaristic term. It's more the preparedness for the work which we're about to do. I'm a big fan of this slide, especially in relation to the work I'm doing in knowledge mobilization. For me, this speaks to assumptions we make around our knowledge base and the extent to which other people know what we're doing, and probably our ability and capacity to communicate clearly. I'll speak for myself. I'm certainly sort of predisposed to say everything all at once, but have come to understand that there's only going to be a sliver to which people are going to listen and, more importantly, understand. This is where clear language writing and design, its principles and approaches can help support a greater understanding by audiences. For us here at York, we've structured our services that puts the reader first and focuses on action. And what I'd really like to do here is provide a bit of an overview around the expectation of my delivery approach. I'm not really going to inundate you with detail and nuance. It's going to be more the reinforcement of concepts and principles. It's safe to say the presentation may land a bit more at 30,000 feet versus the really granular part. So just to create that expectation there. When we get into clear language writing and design, there are four sort of pillars or premises in which we operate on. Firstly is that it uses writing that your audience knows. I mean, at the essence, clear language writing and design is very audience focused and very audience centric. It gives readers the information they need. Again, information they need. Thirdly, it combines what you write with how you write. And the fourth is an important design element, which helps to understand content. And I'll be focusing on this quite a bit over the course of the presentation. I've come to realize over the years the real value and significance that design can play in supporting clear language writing and design processes. I attended a conference back in 2011 for research administrators across the country. There was a faculty member who was talking about his work in clear language writing and design, and not having much of a science background myself, I was quite impressed with the way he presented his information. But this slide really resonated with me because, you know, in terms of scientific terms and terminology, I tend to deviate toward that middle column where I have a sense of what it means to me, and that can be quite different than the actual scientific term itself. And I think the key is that they are both correct, but from an end user or a reader standpoint, I may not simply be able to understand the full breadth or scope of what is being communicated. So his exercise was around using language that may be a little more clear, a little less based on assumptions, and give the reader a greater opportunity to understand the work. Our services here at York University in clear language writing and design have been ongoing for about 7 or 8 years. The Research Snapshot template, which you're familiar with and have seen, is one of our leading products that we've developed as a result of that. And in working with a trainer in adult education, the premise that we convey to folks is that the writing and design process involves 6 very distinct and unique steps. And you can look at these and understand that, you know, some of those seem rather straightforward and intuitive. When it comes to operationalizing this, making the time for number 5 and 6 are really important. And speaking for myself, they tend to be the ones that I can be a little quick to forego. But I'll share a little bit more about our practices here and how we've been able to build that into our operational processes. So the first step around thinking really, again, revolves around your audience and your reader. When we developed the Research Snapshot, we brought together a diverse group of stakeholders and asked them very explicit questions around what is your purpose around the use of research, knowledge, and information. We talked about within our team around what is our desired impact around sharing academic research outputs in a two-page template. For us, we really try to focus these things around a general audience and an audience that can be quite diverse. In some cases, we let our researchers know that the snapshot itself can be utilized as a calling card. You can almost use this to facilitate and introduce relationships. And in some cases, depending on the end user, it can help to inform action. But for us, in the broadest sense, we're looking to increase access to research. Academic research can be difficult for folks to access if they don't have library cards, if they're not connected to a scholarly community. And then even if they can physically access it, the size of the document and some of the language that's used makes it a little more challenging. So we were very deliberate in sort of crafting that research snapshot template, and we spent a fair amount of time in this space. The second one from an actual writing standpoint is about the planning. So when we realized and we kind of landed on, you know, the research snapshot template, then we needed to consider the planning process. And it is here where you know, we set forth some guidelines around the order of information, the tone, and really around format and design. We've developed over the years over 350 research snapshots here at York University, and truly they all have the same look and feel. They're all 2 pages. They're all within 500 to 600 words, and we'll utilize the exact same headings. But that planning process at the front end helped us to create something that was a little more clear and consistent. From an actual writing standpoint, we do provide training for our writers every year, and we give them an opportunity to work in a peer group. The idea of, this is where, in my opinion, the concept of a research snapshot helps to meet the objective by a great extent. By using short sentences, varying the sentence length, and trying to avoid a lot of jargon and terms that would fit within a discipline or a sector, something that would be a little more understood by a broader audience, is what we really try to convey. Design. I mentioned this earlier, that for us this is a very important component. The overall planning process for us, I would say almost 50% of it was around the design of the research snapshot itself. The headings we utilized came together relatively quickly, actually, but the design element was something that we spent a fair amount of time on. And my advice for folks that are going to be doing this kind of writing or have interests just in clear language overall is be very mindful of the design, the use of white space, the use of margins, consistency around font size and headings. The point up top around highlighting text, you know, to be able to use point form or checklists provides a nice break for the reader and is very helpful. The testing and revision. For somebody like myself who operates in a bit more of a just-in-time writing style, I need to build this in. I am a little more insistent with our student writers that they build the time in around the testing and revision. There are some tools and there are links to it which will be available for you. You can see them on the screen right now, that give the writers an opportunity to get a sense of the grade level. I mean, our target when we're developing our research snapshots is to try and come in either side of grade 10. I think certain national newspapers come in at either a grade 6, 8, or 10 level. And and this is an important point, this is where we use the notion of principles. It's not a law. If something comes in at grade 11, well, that's okay. I mean, we really try our best to present the information that maintains the integrity of the original document and is just a little bit more clear. Our process around writing gives the student an opportunity to create a full and complete draft that is checked by a peer, and then it is sent back to the original author for review. And that's where, in some cases, there can be a little bit of pushback. There could be some language in which they feel that it needs to be included that maintains the integrity of that. And I really defer to that original author that we're really trying to accurately reflect and respect their work. In some cases, we will let them know that, well, here are the principles in which we're trying to abide by, but at the end of the day, the sign-off resides with them. So the snapshots themselves, they all follow the headings which are available over on the left. And over the course of 2 pages, they will all have this format. And I'll walk through these in a bit more detail right now. If you are actually going to be doing some writing, there will be information in the next following slides that will help. I mean, if you're looking through a 15 to 25 page journal article, where do you go to get that information? Where are you going to find the appropriate information that will fit into all of these headings? And what are the nuances between those headings? Well, the first one is actually the creation of the headline. And this is really the hook that will grab the reader. And there are a few options for our writers. The first one could be just simplifying the title of the article. In some cases, it's easier for the author to create a question, and then the summary flows from there and answers that. And in a few cases, there are findings from the study that create that hook. I mean, it could be something shocking or controversial or quite eye-opening around the research itself that lends itself to that. An important point, really try to avoid utilizing the academic title as it is. Understand that the development of this snapshot is a tool, and it is a tool that complements the existing academic work. In fact, we'll provide a link to the original article, whether it's a live link to the journal itself, or if it's residing in an open access space, then it links to that. So you're looking for something that's complementary. Second thing is the notion of what is this research about? Well, that's really kind of an introduction to the article. And here we're trying to convey the importance of the topic. As appropriate, maybe define any terms. The example which is embedded is excellent because it shares what DSM is, what ASD is, and that just avoids a lot of assumptions for the reader who may or may not know these terms. It also helps to bring your reader up to speed on the topic. A final point, and again, this is an important one, we stress with our writers that the snapshot is really based on a single study. What we're not trying to do is create a little micro systematic review. It really focuses on the single study itself, and we try to avoid any references to other work. I mean, one of the challenges in the creation of these is staying within an appropriate word limit. For a lot of folks, especially when you're new to this, creating something that's in the 500 to 600 word range can be a little challenging. So focusing on the study itself may make it a little easier. The third section around what did the researchers do, and this kind of mirrors the methods. The big thing for us is clarity and being as concise as possible. I mean, understand it is important to put in some information, but I mean, the tail shouldn't wag the dog here. It's just a matter of being as concise, as generic as possible. Fourthly, around what did the researchers find? I think between this one and the next one, it certainly tends to take up a bit more space. This is a bit of a summary around the results of the article. From a layout standpoint, I think the nature of the results will help to dictate how this is formatted. The layout, again, the results will dictate where you go with this. The use of bullet points is a great way to be able to convey extensive findings. And I don't know about lastly, but around the use of this research. So to be honest, this is a section that for some of our writers has been a bit of a challenge. Certain articles will provide some really some strong and clear messages around the utility and the suggested and recommended utility. But in some cases, some inferences need to be made. And I let our students know that that is okay, because the summary is going to be forwarded back to the original author, and he or she will have an opportunity to review it, edit it, but really kind of sign off on it and say, yes, for policymakers, here's how this could be utilized. For practitioners, here's how you could utilize this, and within the research community, here are some options. So to avoid the anxiety of, wow, I really feel like I'm going out on a limb here, it's okay. The process around the development takes care of that, but I think for the end user, it creates a real value add. In addition to conveying the what, it goes into the so what, and affords people an opportunity to explore the utility. For writers themselves, the abstract, the introduction, and or the conclusion can provide this space. And that last point is an important one as well. At least it is for us around our writing, because we really try and consider multiple and diverse audiences. So we try to cover off those three main areas around policy, practice, and research. The last section is the what you need to know section. And it's funny because you would think the creation of a two-page summary will solicit a full engagement, that folks can make the time to read a two-page summary. But we had some folks in our development really push for this what you need to know section, and we actually shade it in our development, because in some cases people don't even have 5 minutes. It could be 30 seconds, and this gives them, as the title says, what you need to know. So in about 40 to 50 words, you can sort of understand the essence of the article, and it really flows with the headline. If the headline is a question, then this section would answer it. It's as our student writers progress and with experience, they really start to enjoy this section quite a bit, and really look to refine it and make it as poignant as they can. So I've gone through the 6 principles. I've kind of gone through our writing and developmental process. In summary, our snapshot development are based on principles, not rules or laws. We do look to stay within about a 500 to 600 word limit, and that's just, that respects design, because we really try not to compromise on that. We try not to go below a 12-point font, and we really try not to reduce the margin size, because the design is just as important as the content. I'm really proud that our students work in almost like a peer support system. They'll embark on the testing and revising processes, especially if you've been working on a document for a number of iterations. For myself, I lose a little bit of that creative edge, the critical reflection capacity. So they do a really good job making sure that what goes out for a review by the principal investigator is strong. It's clear of any spelling mistakes, and it allows the reader to focus on the content. And also, and this is important because I've only done a few of these, the more you do this, the better you will get at it. The first one I did took me a long, long time, and by the time I got to my fourth one, I felt a lot more confident. I could do it a lot faster. I had a sense of where to go to glean information. I knew what I could almost cut and paste and really just sort of do a gentle wordsmith, and where I needed to do some development. So if this is something that you want to commit to, you will improve as you go along. And that is it. That is all the information I have. I want to thank you all for your patience. I am certainly around for a while to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for that great presentation and such good information. To all the participants, please feel free, that Q&A chat box on the right-hand side there, ask a question, anything that you might think of as you reflect on what you just heard. And we'll get to them in a moment, but first we'll hear from Anneliese Poetz, manager of the KT Core, who would like to say a few words about clear language writing for NeuroDevNet.
Thank you very much, Stacie, and thank you, Michael, for that excellent presentation. You know, Michael's presentation was wonderful because it gives a general overview of clear language writing principles and research snapshots and the format. And you may have actually seen some of the previous research snapshots that we did in our first round for NeuroDevNet on the NeuroDevNet website. I'd like to just talk for a few minutes about doing research snapshots specifically for NeuroDevNet. And so just to remind you, the tagline for the KT Core is to help maximize the impact of your research. And we do that through our training events like this. We do this in a lot of other ways too, but essentially these research snapshots are intended to be one tool to help you to move your research into practice. So typically for NeuroDevNet, we're going for a more targeted audience. We're looking for targeting policymakers and practitioners. And so when Michael was mentioning sort of looking at the general audiences, we're targeting policymakers and practitioners more because we're an NCE, and the NCE requires us to make policy and practice change. However, if you feel strongly that your research will be useful for you know, an audience of parents and families, let us know, because we have Can Child at McMaster, who is now part of the KT Core for Cycle II, and they have access to these audiences of parents and families and youth, and they can test these and revise them according to what this particular audience needs. So like Michael was talking about, we need to have a jargon-free research snapshot, but you need to make sure that the methodology is not only jargon-free and clear, but complete, because policymakers and practitioners often have research background and research knowledge, and they want to see all the information that they're going to want to see in a methodology section. I just wanted to let you know, too, that all of our research snapshots are formatted for accessibility. So what that means is when the final PDF has been formatted and uploaded to the website, it can be read by a screen reader for the visually impaired. Our communications manager, Bethany Becker, features a research snapshot of the week on the NeuroDevNet front page of our website. And of course, having your research in this format allows you to share it with social media, and Bethany is very good at doing that. We can do that as well, and of course you can do that with your social media channels. So this is the first step in our new process for writing research snapshots. So we will be putting out a call soon for PIs to send us candidate NeuroDevNet funded research papers. Of course, if you have any papers that are coming up and you want to let us know, please do contact us, and my email address is on the screen. And then we'll begin the process for you to work with Stacie to draft a summary for one of those papers. So when Michael was talking about having a peer to review your papers, we're actually giving you the peer. We're giving you Stacie Ross. She's an expert in clear language writing, and you, of course, are the content expert. So working together, the end result will be a clear language summary of your research that is both true to the content and also at the appropriate level of reading. We do require sign-off by the original researcher if that's not you. And just to reiterate that all the summaries link back to the original research article. So try not to be married to an academic type of title or writing style, because if people want that level of detail, they can link back to the original research article. And then, of course, once we're done formatting the research snapshot, we post it online, and the link is right there on your screen. And what you can do too with these is you can take them to any workshops or conference presentations that you have, and you can use those as a tool for your presentation. And especially if you do a poster, you can have those as handouts for your poster presentation. And Michael and I can talk about the benefits and the great things about research snapshots, but really the most powerful thing is to hear from the end users. So here are some quotes from policymakers and practitioners about what they think about these research snapshots. So Anthony Coles is a policymaker for the Public Health Agency of Canada, and he wrote us to tell us how much he loves the research snapshots. There was one snapshot that talked about subgroups of ASD, and he actually used that. He didn't know about that. He learned it from our research snapshots, and he's using it now to inform his work at the Public Health Agency of Canada on surveillance and monitoring of autism trends in Canada. And then there's two quotes there from our FASD folks who are practitioners and use it for their in-service training for their own frontline workers, and they also use it for community and social service agency presentations in their newsletters and things. And so, so that's a way that we inform practice with these research snapshots. So they are very useful to our target audiences. And now I'd like to turn over the question and answer period to Stacie Ross to facilitate.
Thank you very much, Anneliese. That was a great presentation. Before we start the questions, your feedback is really important for improving future webinars. Please take a moment and fill out the evaluation survey at the link on the slide. We'll also provide the link right now in the Q&A box. You can easily copy and paste it into your browser window and fill it out during the Q&A. Thank you in advance for doing that. And now we'll see if we have any questions. Let's see, I don't see anything up yet. So I will ask a few. I've certainly thought of a couple while Michael was presenting. Michael, do you have any guidelines that you give to the writers who write the research snapshots?
Sorry, Stacie, could you repeat that again? I was just
no problem.
Failing to multitask. I was looking at John's question too.
I was too. Do you have any guidelines that you give to the writers who write the research snapshot?
Great question. We've now, when we started, we had no guidelines. It was a pilot, and pilots are very liberating because you can just sort of create and see what works, and if you trip up and scuff your knee, you get up and dust it off, and off you go. But we have been doing this for a few years. It's our writers that have created a very brief but kind of a living document. They've created a writer's guide to help them and inform the actual operational work they're doing. So it's something I'd be happy to share with NeuroDevNet. I mean, understand it needs a it needs a clear language edit. It really needs a bit of design work, but there is some very rich content that's been developed over years of our student teams that gets cascaded down over the years. It's just it's really impressive to see. So there are some things that we've been able to create that we can certainly share.
Okay, that's excellent. Yeah, great resource. Thank you. We have a question up here, and I will read it out for those of you whose screens aren't working or couldn't log into the webinar and just have access to the audio. John Aspler asks, really wonderful endeavor and opportunity. Thanks for the presentation. You mentioned that we should not place a study within its body of literature. I realize that there is a word limit, but shouldn't there be some sense of whether this study is novel to the lit, contradicts the lit, or builds on it in some way? Even just a sentence?
Yeah, no problem. John, that's a great question, and this is where the notion of principles versus hard rules and laws come into effect. It is sometimes the kind of the pushback we get from the PI around this, where they really want to do this. If you can do it within one or two sentences, I think that's great, but that tends to be a bit of a challenge. And not to say that opening up a study within the body of literature is a Pandora's box, but it can be a challenge to limit the word count. And really that's the biggest constraint we have is just managing within space. In some cases, we are coming closer to 500 words, so there really is space for 2 or 3 sentences or a short paragraph to frame a finding within an emerging body of literature. So not to firmly sit myself on the fence, I think everything can be looked at as a case-by-case study. In our history, it's difficult to manage that one sentence as you articulate. So I think you'll get a sense from your team as to how important that is. But as writers, if you're going to be doing the writing, then you are the custodian of the word limit. Well, in a quick story, we had somebody come in and our students did a draft, and then they were very appreciative. They said, I want to do some edits on this. And they came back with something that was almost 1,200 words long. So we had to come back and say, well, we've got a bit of a challenge here because I really appreciate the content, but now we're about 100% over our limit. And they were able to go back and forth, but I think those are the things you need to be mindful of, John. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Next question is from Vanessa. My area of research is very jargon heavy, and I wonder how you balance not using too much jargon with the alternative of possibly being long-winded in your explanation or risking oversimplifying concepts.
Excellent question. I think the key is to go back to who are your desired audiences, Vanessa. I mean, for NeuroDevNet, if you're focusing on a policy or practitioner audience, and maybe they do have a sense of terminology, then that might be okay. I mean, the one thing to avoid and can keep, allow you to work within a spatial limit is throw out the term once and then use the acronym or some sort of short form of it. But in some cases, things need to be, I mean, it's articulating it as clearly as possible. So I hope that helps. I mean, I understand it could be a bit more of a challenge within the sciences, and that's the kind of, when we did one summer of climate change research, and it was probably one of the more challenging because the terms had a significant context to it, and we just had to go with that. There were certain headings we had to be very concise, but context is everything, and the audience as well. So I hope that helps.
Right. Excellent. Okay. And another question from Jessica pertaining to word limit. What are some of the things we can assume the audience may know? I find I spend most of my words trying to explain my topics in lay terms, and I lose space for my actual research results. What are some tips to avoid the situation?
And I'll have to check on this, Jessica, to see whether or not the writer's guide has what amounts to a recommended word limit for each of those 6 headings. Because under what did the researchers do, you may need to stay within 75 words. Because I know I shared something explicit around that what you need to know section of 40 to 50. It might be a little easier if you're working within a word count for each of those 6 headings. I'll check and see if we have that. If not, I believe my colleague at Wilfrid Laurier, and they've started to utilize this tool as well. I think she's been able to break it down in a bit more detail. So I'm hopeful that will help. I mean, I acknowledge the challenge the first few times around where it is I mean, the writing process isn't too onerous. It's the ongoing editing and paring down, and that's where a buddy system helps too. You're not feel like you're going at it alone.
Michael, thank you for that answer. And just to let the audience know that any other resources that we are talking about now that we can share, we can send that out after the webinar. We have all of your email addresses, so we will do that. So just to let you know.
Okay, great. Another question I have, Michael, is what were the challenges around the developmental process when you created the research snapshots?
The challenges were they were fairly extensive. There were a couple. The first main one was the fact that we didn't have a lot of experience. We were really trying something out. But what we did to offset that is we were working with some faculty champions. We were working with some folks that, to be quite candid, they were going to be kind and gentle with us. They knew what we were trying, and they were going to be pretty soft in their criticism and pretty constructive in their feedback. And that was helpful, and it really helped to align us as we started moving forward. We also worked pretty closely with our instructor over that first year. He came in a couple times with our student teams, our student team that first year, and provided a lot of ongoing support for them. And this is in advance to that writer's guide that they had been able to develop. That helped as well. Now, we've been fortunate over 8 years. We've been able to hire what I would say is students with really strong communication skills, strong interests in research, and a really good ability to communicate with diverse audiences, because at the end of the day, they would have to go back and forth with the PI. So our challenges in the early days were fairly extensive. What was less of a challenge for us was the creation of the template. When we started and developed the Research Snapshot one you're looking at, we looked at about 10 different models. There were a fair amount of them out there. We brought together diverse stakeholder groups. We brought together some of our researcher champions. We brought together some practitioners we worked with, and some policy professionals from the province of Ontario who we've gotten to know. And that diverse feedback helped to shape what we did.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of work. That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in at the moment, but oh, I just caught one come in. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. A much broader question. Would you approach the KT of qualitative research differently than quantitative research? How would that influence the design and content of the research snapshots? For example, interviews, literature review on cultural understandings versus incidence of ASD.
I think that's a really good question, and I'm not sure to what extent I'm going to be able to answer that. I think in some ways quantitative could be a little easier, because the data and information is a little more clear and straightforward. It could be a bit more of a cut and paste effort. So there are certain headings in which I think that would be a little easier. There are some that may be a bit more challenging in terms of the utilization of that. So it's almost a bit of an inverted answer, where some of the headings might be easier with the quantitative, some of the others might be a little easier with the qualitative. I'm going to sort of do a bit of a segue. If there are instances where the writing process is challenging, or you're getting a fair amount of pushback from the original author, and we've had this in the past from time to time, I let the students know that it might be appropriate to either set up a phone call or an interview, depending on geography. Sit down with that individual and just simply try and ask those questions directly to them. If they can convey that information to you in a way in which you can understand it, they've kind of written your snapshot for you. I think we had to do that year around climate change, where, and maybe this really gets to the crux of your question, where there was a fair amount of quantitative data that was a little bit harder to qualify, and where they got to the point where it's like, oh, I just, it's frustrating and I can't do it. I suggested that interview process. Now the PI, by default, should be able to go through and answer those questions concisely, and just continue to keep asking them until, because the key is, if you're able to get a clear and common understanding around what they did and what they found, then I think you're fine. It's just a matter of taking that information. So that's always our fallback, our kind of plan B.
Okay, that sounds great. Next comes in from Anneliese. Michael, how much should there be about previous research in the "What is this research about?" section versus just information about the one paper that is being summarized in the research snapshot?
Well, our philosophy around that, Anneliese, is to deal with everything as a one-off. It is really sort of a standalone process. So we try not to, unless of course the paper in which we're summarizing grounds it within this huge emerging critical and important body of literature, because really the snapshot itself is reflective of that single study, and that's purposeful. I mean, it's really it becomes a tool to effectively communicate that individual research study. I mean, there's a whole other methodology around systematic reviews and a whole other purpose around that we've intentionally tried to avoid. It's just a little easier for us to manage. So I would take my cue from the paper itself, and if it broaches that subject, then I think you can safely go there. But we try to avoid it.
Michael, thank you for that answer. I just wanted to jump in and clarify something with you, hoping that you can provide some information from your experience with this. I know that for NeuroDevNet, what we learned very quickly on was that trying to summarize a review paper was actually not a good idea. So we don't typically do that, but I know that you and York University's Knowledge Mobilization Unit are exploring summarizing different formats of information like reports and review articles, perhaps. I just wondered if you could speak to that and what you think that might mean for NeuroDevNet.
Great question. I mean, it is something we're starting to explore, and we haven't done it yet, but we have had, I mean, similar to today, we've had a few questions about it. The thing I appreciate about the culture in which I work in here is that there's a lot of latitude to try. There isn't the expectation that everything is going to be perfect. I mean, absent the full suite of services that we offer, we've tried a few things that candidly have been an abysmal failure, and we kind of sit down and do a bit of a constructive audit around that. Well, why didn't it work? Should we try it again? What if we tweak it? And in some cases we do, and in some cases we don't. But we also will go and ask. We'll ask stakeholders. We'll ask some trusted, colleagues. It's like, we tried this and it really bombed. And have you got any ideas why? I mean, it really is a fairly candid conversation. So when we start to embark on that process, I think it will be under the guise of piloting, under it being safe space. The feedback that we're going to get from the author or authors will be critical. The feedback we'll get, we're certainly comfortable trying things, but we know well enough when to kind of abort and say, no, that's, wow, it just didn't work. So the answer to that is we'll let you know. I mean, I can certainly see how it could open up some challenges, probably more so around the ability to summarize a body of knowledge. But that being said, we're still going to work within the parameter of the document, and if it is a book or a book chapter, we'll just try to manage the content that is provided to us. So I might have a better answer for you in like 8 or 9 months from now. But my advice for you guys is don't be afraid to try it, but feel that you can try it in a safe way. All right, there's I don't think there's you need that culture of being able to take a chance on things. I mean, we started out 8 years ago, and this was a pilot. And if someone would have told me we'd still be doing it 8 years from now, I would have been a little surprised and quite ecstatic. You never know until you try. But build a really good, safe, qualitative, and constructive feedback loop that will let you know whether you're onto something or just spinning your wheels.
Good advice. Another question has come in from Camila. Thank you for these great presentations. For a very broad audience, is there a way to adapt the jargon and effectively communicate complex scientific concepts to practitioner, parents, etc.? Or do you need to produce different documents targeted to specific audiences?
Great question. For us, we try and make it one size fits all, but I think there could be some options around maybe parallel documents. Even the notion of just a one-pager. So it all goes back to audience and purpose. If the purpose is more of a generic education and awareness campaign, then maybe you want to do a video-based snapshot where you've got somebody who I'd feel like I was more actively engaged with that person that was talking to me, clearly and in language I can understand, and then certainly within a certain amount of time. My assumption when we started was that podcasts would be a big hit. They didn't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole. They're like, nope, this is what we want. We want text-based, fully searchable database, and that was consistent across the researcher policy and practitioner audience base. So it certainly could be something for yourselves as a group to start to explore, is the need for maybe a parallel product that would really speak to a specific audience. For us, the decision was all around capacity and more the excitement of just trying something new. And we haven't had that kind of feedback where it's like, okay, York University and Research Impact Network, let's start to develop some parallel processes. But never be afraid to ask the questions, though. We just haven't had that need crystallize.
Thanks, Michael. Can I jump in and just offer a NeuroDevNet KT Core perspective on that question? I mentioned in my presentation that we do have another couple of sites to the NeuroDevNet KT Core for Cycle 2, and one of these sites is CanChild at McMaster University, and I was looking in the participant list to see if Bree was still here so I could throw this question to her, but she has left the webinar. But essentially, CanChild is expert in creating summaries of research for parent audiences, and this is their area of expertise. But what I've learned from them so far is that parents, it's not necessarily the level of language that's different for parents, it's the things that you choose to highlight about that research paper in the summary. So a parent might want, both the summary, so you've got two summaries. One of them is for practitioners and policymakers, and the other one is for parents. And so essentially what I'm saying is that I believe that policymakers and practitioners would want different pieces of information from that peer-reviewed paper highlighted as opposed to parents. And certainly in the section at the end of the research snapshot for how can you use this information would be different for a policymaker or practitioner to use that research in their practice and to inform policies than what a parent would use in their family circumstances to help with their child that has a neurodevelopmental disorder. So I hope that helps.
That's great, Anneliese. We'll just give it a moment in case someone is in the middle of typing a question, and I can speak for myself and say that I've certainly learned a lot from the great presentations and the questions and answers. It's good to be a part of this. If that is all the questions for now, I would like to give a big thanks to our speaker, Michael Johnny, for his excellent and very informative presentation. And thanks to all of you for participating. We're grateful to any of those who have filled out the evaluation survey already. Your feedback is valuable for enhancing future NeuroDevNet KT Core webinars. For those of you who didn't have a chance, I will send it in an email following the webinar, along with the links to the presentations on SlideShare. Visit us at neurodevnet.ca/KT to find links to the KT Core blog, neurodevnet.wordpress.ca, our YouTube channel, and Research Snapshots, and for practical tools and guides to help you with your KT. As always, you can contact the KT Core for help or to tell us your ideas for tools, services, guides, and topics that you would find helpful in maximizing your own KT efforts. We look forward to hearing from you. So I guess if we're all done, we can sign off, and goodbye, everybody.